The snow was still falling when they left her. No ceremony, no final look back, just a pair of footprints leading away through the white and oat. Then the trees closing around them, and then nothing, only the sound of wind moving through pine branches and the soft, continuous silence of a forest that did not know it was supposed to care. She was an infant. She didn't understand yet what abandonment meant. She only knew cold and hunger, and then warmth. The kind that came pressed against other bodies, a whole cluster of them, moving through the trees in formation, their tails brushing the snow, their eyes catching the low, winter light in colors that had no human name. The foxes found her, or she found them. The distinction, in the end, didn't matter. They took her in the way wild things sometimes do, not with decision, not with the conscious moral weight that humans attach to such moments, but with the simple animal logic of, she is here, she is small, she is cold. She became part of the pack, the way a river absorbs rain. Without deliberation, without record, her name was Ahri, and for a long time, that was the only thing in the world that was entirely hers. If you're new here, subscribe. Every week, a new League of Legends story. This one will stay with you. She grew up in the forest, the way the forest grows, slowly, without a fixed plan, shaped by what the environment required of her, rather than by anything she chose. No one taught her the magic, it came anyway. The ice fox lineage carried something in it that Ahri absorbed the way she absorbed everything else from her adopted family, through proximity, through immersion, through the long years of simply being present in a world that was drenched in the particular magic of northern Ionia. She learned to shape energy into spheres of crackling force without knowing what she was doing, the way a child learns to walk without understanding biomechanics. She learned to move faster than she should have been able to, her reflexes sharpening past the point of ordinary animal quickness into something else, something that operated in the space between instinct and intention. She learned, most significantly, to make things calm. A deer she had stalked long enough, approached with the right kind of stillness, would stop, trembling, would let her come close, would stand entirely at peace even as her teeth found its throat, as if the act of dying had been transformed by her proximity and her inexplicable gift into something gentle. She didn't know what this was. She didn't know it was unusual. It was simply how the world 20U worked, as far as she understood the world. She had two objects from her other life, the life before the snow, before the foxes, before the forest. A pair of jewels, twin stones, left with her when she was left. She carried them always. She had prax, didn't know what they meant. She didn't know who had placed them in the wrappings beside Plemerath her. They were the only evidence that she had come from somewhere, that someone had known her before the forest did. She held them sometimes in the dark and tried to feel backward through them, the way you try to remember a dream that's already dissolving. Nothing came. The soldiers arrived in spring, a company of them, making camp near the edge of the glade, their fires cutting orange shapes out of the tree line, their voices carrying across the water, in the particular way that human voices do, carrying not just sound but information, whole emotional architectures compressed into tone and rhythm. Ahri had never encountered humans before. She watched them from the tree line, with the patient, cataloging attention she'd learned from the foxes, her tail still, her eyes moving across the camp in careful sweeps. They were strange to her, strange the way anything is strange, when you have no framework for it, not threatening exactly, not fascinating exactly, but occupying some third category that had no name yet. One of them was different from the others. Most of the soldiers were loud in the specific way of men who have been together long enough to perform casualness, their jokes carrying an edge of competition, their laughter slightly too immediate, their waste careless and total. This one moved quietly. When he killed an animal for Dolfa, nachta teminteka papik, kasa partamentaker, holkorid lijo gach papik, media para, holkorid lijo, holkorid lijoa, Crafty food. He showed the same care with materials that the fox pack showed, the first mintekerera, nothatekere deligua. Same instinctive refusal to take more than what was necessary. She watched him for 2 days before the arrow found him. She didn't see who fired it. She saw only the moment of impact, the way he went still, the particular quality of stillness that was different from sleep or rest, the stillness of a body, beginning to understand that it was losing the argument with its own continued existence. What happened next, she could not have explained. She moved toward him without deciding to. Her body crossed the distance before her mind had finished forming the thought, and when she reached him, something happened that she had no language for. She felt his life the way you feel heat from a fire, as a real and physical thing, and then she felt it moving, and without understanding what she was doing, she breathed it in. His memories arrived with it, not all at once. In fragments. The way light comes through leaves, in shifting pieces that never quite resolve into a complete picture. A woman's face, turned away. Children in a city, made of Didneferkra. Iron and stone, their voices echoing off surfaces that were nothing like the forest she knew. The Gaili specific texture of grief that comes from losing someone before you'd finished understanding what they meant to you. And underneath all of it, something stranger. She could feel what he had felt, not as description, as experience. The fear was her fear, the love was her love. The moment of his death was her moment too. And she was present in it, holding him, and she understood that she could change what it felt like. She turned it toward the light. She built him a meadow out of his own memories. The best meadow she could find in the Sib. Fragments she'd absorbed. Sun-warm and wide, and full of the specific silence that comes after. Long noise has stopped. She held that image in the space between them, and let it be the last thing. He moved toward. Then he was gone. And she was standing in the forest with her hands shaking and something new living in her chest, a warmth that was not her warmth, a completeness she had never felt before, a terrible aliveness that made everything before it seem like a rough draft. She wanted more. She wanted more the way the body wants air, not as preference, not as desire in the soft human sense, but as need, as imperative, as the deep, unreasonable insistence of a thing that has discovered what it requires to function and cannot unknow that knowledge. She moved through Ionia for months after that, and she was not careful, and she was not kind. She played with them first, her targets, her victims, whichever word fit the version of the story being told. She was curious about them, genuinely curious, and the curiosity was not false or performed. She wanted to know what they felt. She built visions for them with the magic she was, still only half understanding. Beautiful visions, the meadows and sunsets and reunions that lived in the architecture of their longing, and she watched the visions land, and then she took what the visions stirred up, and she breathed it in, and she moved on. She saw extraordinary things in the memories she collected. She saw the inside of a shadow temple, the faces of its devotees worn smooth with decades of devotion. She saw the living Geisa, embodiment of sunlight, in a form that mortals had constructed a theology around. She saw the Penyanum, the Staya, the bird-like beings who spoke only in song, and the mountains of Ionia from angles she had never accessed from the forest floor. She cried over a Noxian invasion of a village she had never visited, the grief arriving through the Sobark, memory of someone who had survived it, raw and recent and real. She absorbed joy, she absorbed heartbreak, she absorbed a life's worth of accumulated human experience in pieces and fragments, and she was drunk on all of it. Drunk on the simple fact of other people, of interiority, of the infinite complexity of beings who had names and histories and viras kamala, people who had loved them and places they had come from. She found a story about herself. It arrived through someone else's memory, a fragment of local legend, passed between villages. The way cautionary tales pass, slightly distorted at each telling. A nine-tailed fox. A creature that Ungan Moor steals life. A beautiful thing that approaches and leaves death in its wake. The legend was about her. She stood in the forest holding someone else's fear of herself, and she felt the world rearrange. Slightly around the knowledge of what she was. Not what she thought she was. What the forest sepally around evidence said she was. What the bodies and the emptied lives behind her confirmed she was. The word they used in the stories was demon. She stopped. Not immediately. The hunger didn't stop when she decided to stop, the way a fire doesn't stop. When you decide to stop tending it. She tried smaller portions. One memory, two, taken, carefully from someone who would still be standing when she left. She managed it for a while. The discipline held. Then it didn't. A coastal town. A single lapse in a single night when the hunger was loud enough to drown the Bakhia B. EB discipline. She moved through the town like weather, taking without counting, and by morning. The residents were alive and upright, and emptied in some way they couldn't name, missing pieces of themselves they had no language to describe. She felt what she had done. She felt it with the same precision. She felt everything. The guilt, arriving as clearly as the hunger had arrived, as clearly as the first stolen life had arrived. There read was no buffer. There was no softening mechanism. She had built herself, through months of Badaya Blag, absorption, into a creature that experienced consequence at full volume. She went into the mountains. She found a cave deep enough that the world couldn't reach her. She stayed for years, long. Enough that the seasons stopped feeling like separate things and became a single continuous weather. She sat with what she was and refused to let the hunger direct her anymore. When she came out, she was the same and she was different. The hunger was still there. It would always be there. But she had spent years in the dark learning the difference between what she was and what she chose to do about it. Learning that the nature of a thing and its behavior were not the same thing, that she could be what she was, without acting on it the way she had acted on it. She pressed her hands around the twin jewels and made a decision that had the weight of years behind it. She would not use borrowed memories anymore. She would not live through the fragments of other people's lives. She wanted her own history, her own context, her own people, if such people existed anywhere in the world. She wanted to know where the jewels came from. She wanted to know who had left her in the snow. She wanted for the first time to live forward rather than sideways. She set out from the mountains on a morning when the light was the particular pale gold of early spring, her nine tails catching the wind, her eyes carrying everything she had absorbed, and Kobe, everything she had survived. She did not know what she was looking for, exactly. She knew only that it existed, that, somewhere in the world, there were answers shaped like her questions. And that she was, finally, ready to find them. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new League of Legends lore video every week. Ahri's journey is only just beginning.